Now for the JRPG mechanic that I think is dope, I want to bring up something that I've noticed in Trails Through Daybreak as I've been playing it. And because I'm going to be talking about Trails Through Daybreak a lot in this segment, I'm going to pretty much smoothly transition from this segment to the what I've been playing segment when I get to that, because I've just been playing Daybreak, and so there's going to be kind of a blurred line of when I move to that, but just so you know, that's what's going to happen. And so for the JRPG mechanic that I want to talk about in Trails Through Daybreak is their combat system, or specifically the way they do the combat system. And this is very interesting, where if you played any of the other Trails games in the past, every game has been a turn-based game. And I want to say it's like between a traditional turn-based game like Pokemon and a grid-based game, where technically you can move your characters around and your attacks have like AoE kind of ranges where they do the damage. But Trails has always had more freedom, where like you can move around more, like the area of effect damage is very loose, where like if you can kind of finagle the circle to encompass all the enemies, it will damage them and things like that. And so the Trails games have been my favorite in terms of combat systems, but I did see an article before saying that they do want to move more to a real-time system, which I was kind of worried about, because I'm like, I don't know if they should, and I don't know if this is the game they were talking about doing it with, because they did change the combat system in this, but they didn't do it fully, which I think is interesting. So basically what they did is they have a real-time combat system and a turn-based combat system in this. And the way it works is, usually in Trails, when you see an enemy and you touch it, or if you hit it, the turn-based combat starts. And in this, what they did is they have the real-time combat system, which is the field combat, and they have the turn-based combat system, which is the command combat. And what happens now is when you see an enemy on the field and you touch it, nothing happens. You just get to fight it on the field. So you can attack. You can attack a lot of times, get this kind of charge meter, then use a powerful attack, and you can literally just kill them on the field and you're good. And if you really want, you can press square. You'll do a thing that's called dropping shards in the game, and once you do that, that pretty much allows you to make a field for the turn-based system, and then it just goes back to how it used to be with some changes which I'll talk about. And so this is very interesting to me, because like I've seen attempts at trying to make real-time and turn-based together. One of the most famous is the ATB system, which I think is absolutely garbage. I hate the ATB system, but personally, but like that's, I feel like people have said like, yeah, that's kind of like real-time and turn-based, because you have the turn-based menus, we have the real-time aspect of it. I've never liked it, and so seeing this game take real-time elements and turn-based elements and put them together is very cool. And surprisingly, after playing this game, I hope every Trails game uses the system. I just like it more than the turn-based only system, because you pretty much remove the aspect of Trails where, like, you know, sometimes you'll go into a new area and say you're in this grasslands area, which is very big, and a lot of the times what would happen, at least the way I play, is every time I come into a new area and I see bad guys, I like to kill every single bad guy to get the XP, just so I don't have to grind again in the future. And that's literally worked for every single Trails game I've played. And so the thing is, that does get kind of like tiring, where like you have to touch every single enemy, fight a fuck ton of enemies, and like like every turn-based game, or like most turn-based games, when you see one enemy on the field, that usually constitutes some more enemies in the battle, which is kind of annoying. Where this game, since it's real time, every enemy you see is all the enemies, so you can just go up to them and kill them, and fighting them in real time usually is faster. It is like objectively faster, because there will be times where like there are moments where the bad guys can actually force you to go into a turn-based combat. So there's these special moves they can do where they kind of glow red and hit you, and if they're able to hit you successfully, it says enemy advantage, and pretty much what happens is they start the battle on the upper hand and they can start attacking you, and it's a turn-based battle from there. And I know it's slower in turn-based, because like there'll be times where like I'm about to kill an enemy, like it'd probably take like, I don't know, 6 more hits to kill an enemy, but that constitutes to like 2000 HP, and 2000 HP takes a bit in turn-based to get down to 0. And so what could have been 6 hits, which could have took like 5 seconds, is now going to take like a minute of combat or something, for example. And so I'm really liking how speedier the game feels because of the real-time combat. But because of this real-time combat system, or this field battle system, what ends up happening is there are just so many more enemies on the field now, because like I said, in the previous Trails games, if there were 3 enemies on the field, what that usually meant was if you touch an enemy, you might be fighting 5 enemies per enemy on the field, if that makes sense. So if there's 3 enemies on the field, in the turn-based combat, there might have been 15 enemies total. And what's happening in this game is, instead of the 3 enemies on the field, you will see all 15 enemies on the field now, because they are literal, you know, you can like fight them in real time now, so they have to render all the enemies on the field. And so what that does is, whenever you go to a new area, you're just fucking blasted by the amount of enemies you see, especially if you have the ability where you can see them on the minimap. It just surprises me, where like usually an area would have maybe like, I don't know, 15 enemies in like the old Trails games, and this one would have like 70 or something, like an insane amount. And some of them are quite strong, like you gotta like really you know, get down, get their health down slowly and like fight them. It'll take like several minutes to kill one, even in the real-time combat system. So it's very, very interesting how they implemented it. The one thing I would say, if I had to like adjust it, is I know why they did this, but they made the real-time combat system very simple. Even though they did like build upon the previous games. The previous games you were only able to hit, and once you hit an enemy, you went to turn-based. In this, you can hit, you can dodge, and you can use your charge attack, which is a meter that fills up as you fight or get hit, and then you can charge enemies and stun them. And that's cool. It's a lot more than the previous games, obviously. And I 100% see why they kept it this simple, because they want the turn-based system to be the main form of combat, which it is. Every time you fight a boss or like there's a story battle, it is always going to force you in the turn-based system, which I like. But hopefully in the future, if they do keep building upon the system, it would be nice if within the field real-time combat you can use some arts. Like if I'm able to use some of my fire spells and water spells, even if it's like a simplified version. Like for example, if like my main character Van, he's mostly a wind spell guy. If they made it that in the real-time battle he just has like a generic wind spell that he can use, I'd be fine with that. That's cool. Like if they don't want to do the entire menu-based system, which I can see they don't want to, it'd be nice if I can just use a long-range wind-based system, because there are enemies that when you're fighting them on the field, like your kind of AI partner thing would say like, hey, this is an enemy that you need to use arts for, or you're not going to damage them that much. And right now the only way to combat that is to change to a character that uses arts. And in my case, there's like literally only one character that does that. And so if she wasn't in my party, I'd be kind of fucked for this enemy. So it'd be kind of nice if you could just use arts with any character, because every character does use arts. That is a thing you can do in the turn-based system. So if every character had some kind of arts ability in the field combat, that would be nice. On top of that, if they want to make it more complex, you can even add your CP abilities. Like everyone has like physical abilities they have, which are like cool animations at play. Maybe they can add that in the future. But yeah, so far, again, I get it. This is the first game they added the system. I actually agree with their choice of making it very simple. I honestly wouldn't even be mad if they kept it simple, but at the least I would want an arts system on top of that, just so I can also do arts damage if I want, / long range damage, because if you're fighting an enemy with a sword user like Van, you just always have to be up their ass and be very close, whereas it'd be nice if I could just kind of, go long range sometimes when I need to, without needing to switch my character to an arts user. But yeah, that is something, or some kind of criticism that I did have with the system. But yeah, I just think overall this is very nice, especially because this is kind of like a joke with myself, I guess, whenever I play the Tearal's games. But like I said, I only fight the enemies on the field the first time I'm in an area. So if I'm in this forest area for the first time, I will kill every enemy and then move on to the story. But if I ever come back in that area just to like travel or for like another story purpose, I don't fight enemies. And what ends up happening is that I usually just have to dodge every single fucking enemy. So if I'm running across this forest, I have to make sure I swerve around every single enemy and make sure not to touch them, which kind of gets annoying. And the nice thing with this game is there's none of that now, because when you touch an enemy, nothing bad happens. Like it won't start the battle. You can just run past them and it's fine. So I never have to do the freaking thing where like I have to like swerve around enemies anymore. I just like run straight past them or through them or whatever, and there's zero risk of a battle starting, which I just think is very nice. And yeah, I think that's pretty much all I want to say about the combat. Actually, you know what? In terms of the turn-based combat, let me talk about that. The turn-based combat, they did evolve it more. So I mentioned the way the turn-based combat works in Tearal's is it's turn-based. You have different shapes of area of effects of spells. Some are just like a straight line. Some are circles. Some are just single enemies. And the way like everything worked in terms of the combat in the previous game is you can either do an attack, like a magic spell or like a physical attack or whatever, or you can move. And I've always thought the movement system in Tearal's was just like useless. Like it seemed weird that, like, for example, sometimes an enemy would be doing a magic spell and you could see their circle that they're gonna attack, and I would want to move outside of it and then attack them, but they would let you move and then you just can't attack anymore, so it'd be completely useless. So like you would pick the spot you want to move and your turn's over, and that always felt like a waste. And so what I would usually end up doing is I just didn't move and I would just tank the hit, because I would at least be able to hit them back. In this game, they made it miles better. And so basically what it is it's when it's your turn, it pretty much just becomes it's almost like you're fighting in real time now, where like you just get to move your character around with your analog stick. So you can run around wherever you want. There's no limit in terms of how long you run for. They do have a circle of how far you can run, and that changes per character. But I can literally just like take my character, run behind the enemy, and then use an attack on them, and it's cool. I can move and attack in the same turn, and it's just fantastic. That's something that like I've always wanted, I feel like, but I didn't know that I wanted, and I just think it works great. And because they do have this new movement system, what is nice is they actually have some attacks that take advantage of it. So for example, Van, he has one move that it's a move that's a sword attack and it kind of goes out in a cone shape, and if you hit an enemy from the side, it does more damage. And so what you'd always want to do is you'd want to move to the side of an enemy, and then they'll tell you that you're beside them, then you attack them, and then you just get more damage. And there's more moves that if you're behind an enemy, it does more damage. So not only did they add this movement system, that alone would be very cool to me, but the fact that they actually gave a reason to do it, where they actually have moves that take advantage of the movement system, I think that's fucking great. Another thing that makes a movement system even better is they pretty much have this thing where if you're in the range of another party member, everything about you is boosted. So you do more damage when you attack. Actually, I think that's it. I'm not really sure. I'm not sure exactly what it does, but pretty much what they say is like, if you're near another party member, these kind of glowing rings will come around you, and whenever you do an attack, you'll have an animation of them kind of like supporting you, and I'm assuming you do more damage. And that's just another benefit of the movement system, where like, you kind of have to choose, do you want to stay with your other characters and not move, or do you think it'd be more beneficial for you to run away from the character and not get that boost, but you'll be able to get extra damage from doing a back attack? So you kind of have to make those choices, and pretty much what ends up happening for me is I pretty much just keep characters in pairs. So if I have some characters in front of the enemy, I'll just make sure there's 2 there and the other 2 are behind the enemy and things like that. When I first started playing, I was just keeping all the characters together because I'm like, might as well, they'll all be in their, you know, range of the rings, and they'll be getting the boost from the other characters. But that usually ends up being a bad thing, because an enemy can just use an attack and affect everyone, that can fuck you over really bad. And so I started using that less and splitting characters up, and then as the battle goes on, I'll slowly just get them in pairs so they can still get that boost, but also still have the tactical advantage of hitting the enemy from the behind or side if they need to, which is very cool. And so that small change of adding a movement system and building upon it by having the character boosting when they're in your range and having attacks that you can do more damage with from the side or back, I think is just like chef's kiss. Like, they implemented it perfectly and it works perfectly, and I love it. And I hope they don't go back to the old system, because I bet now if I go back to an older Trolls game, I'm gonna be like, oh yeah, right, you can't move, I forgot about that. Because this game has just been feeling, it's just such a natural progression where like it doesn't even feel like they just threw away the old system. It really feels like they cared about the old system, but they really want to modernize it in a way that works, and it just really does. And so yeah, I just think that the way the command-based turn-based system melds with the field-based real-time system is perfect. And like I mentioned, we're going to be smoothly going into the next segment of what I've been playing, which is Trails to Daybreak. So I'm just going to be continuing to talk about the game. So that was the combat section of the game. So let's talk about the other aspects of Trails to Daybreak. And in terms of how far I'm in it, I'm 50 hours in. I think when I did my last episode, I was like barely into the game. I believe I was specifically like 3 or 4 hours into the game, because that day was like the first day I played the game, so I only played for 3 to 4 hours, and I've been playing every night since. And so I am like 49 to 50 hours into the game, so I can give you my thoughts. No spoilers if you want to know exactly where I'm in chapter 3. I'm kind of ending chapter 3. That's where I'm at right now. And yeah, so I already talked about combat. That was an entire thing. And in terms of the other aspects, let's talk about that. So one of the things that I want to talk about is the characters. I think the characters in this game are very good. Like all Trails games, the characters are amazing. They're like pretty much all likable. Like the party members that I have so far are very cool, and I'm just really liking the character aspects of it. And I love there's always mystery too. Like there's always some aspects of characters that you don't know. One character, this isn't a spoiler, she's literally the first character you see, is Agnes. The plot is kind of driven based on what she wants to do, and it's always kind of a mystery of like, why does she want to do this? Like, what's the reason behind it? And we really don't know. And like us as the main character know that she isn't telling us the truth, but like at the same time, like we don't care. We're like, it's fine, we're helping you. And so there's that character aspect, which is very cool. And in terms of like the main character Van, I think he's just like, I fucking love him. I remember when the game was coming out and they were showing images of him, and I never watched any of the trailers because I didn't want to spoil myself, but the one thing that I was very interested in seeing was how they would handle his character, because with Trails in the Sky, Cold Steel, Zero/Azure, all the characters seem similar, with all like very positive, kind of smiley, happy characters. Rain probably a bit less so, but he's still like a very positive guy. But whenever I was seeing Van in the promotional materials, I was like, this dude looks like a lot older. He seems a lot serious. He seems like more deadpan, and I was wondering how that was gonna go, and I was clearly off the mark. That's not how he is at all. He is a nice guy. He is more in the like morally questionable side of things. That's kind of the entire plot, where like he doesn't do everything legally, but he doesn't do everything illegally. He's always like right on the line, which is very interesting. But in terms of his character, I couldn't have been more wrong. He is not a deadpan serious character. He's as goofy as like the other characters. He fucking loves sweets, cars, and saunas. That's the thing that everyone makes fun of him about. And like, it's just very cool when like there's a car, he just kind of geeks out about it. When he eats a sweet, he fucking goes into a trance of how he loves it, and he explains it like a real pro. So I'm really liking him as a character. One of the main things that I love about Van is, well, I was worried when I was coming into the game because they're pretty much adding this new series into the Tearal series. Like I said, there's the Sky series, the Zero/Azure series, and the Cold Steel series. And if you play those games, you know they all intertwine. By the end of like Reverie, for example, every character knows each other. They've been through a fuck ton together. Like they're an entire team. Like they all know each other and they've been through so much together. So how would they add this new group? Because obviously there's gonna be a new group, and I'm like, obviously they're gonna have the characters interact with this group at some point in the future too, I'm assuming. And so I was kind of worried with like, how are they gonna have to introduce every single character again? Like every time you see an old character, are they gonna have to be introduced? And because if you didn't know, they have a fuck ton of characters in Trails. Like just from Trails Reverie alone, the cast of characters that were playable were like 40. Like you had 40 characters or something to pick through, which is a lot. And so like if they had to introduce all of them to Van and everyone in this game, I was like, how are they gonna do it? And so the genius thing this game did is Van already knows everybody. That's just a choice they made. And when that happened, I was like, yo, that's so smart. So pretty much, I won't go to spoilers right now, but there are characters in this game from the old series. There's been like a few already. And whenever they met up with Van was like, oh yeah, I remember you from 2 years ago. Or like, oh yeah, I met you 5 years ago. Like Van just knows everybody already, which is really fucking funny. And so like slowly throughout the game, you're kind of realizing how he's doing that. And so I guess one thing I'll say, if this is a spoiler for you, skip like 30 seconds. But the reason Van knows about a lot of this stuff is apparently, if you play Trails of Cold Steel, I believe it was 3 or 4, there was an operation they did called Meo's Mirage, where they kind of had to save the fucking world. They pretty much revealed in this game that Van was a part of it. He was just helping behind the scenes. And so that's how he knows a lot of the people. So a lot of the characters that are from Cold Steel, or like even Trolls in the Sky or whatever, like some characters that are coming back, Van just already knows them and he has a history with them. And I feel like that's just the best way to go about it, because for the people who have played those games, since we already know it and Van already knows it, you kind of like get this, like you kind of get to skip all the bullshit of like reintroducing them. But at the same time, because Van's party members don't know them, you do still get like a quick introduction of who they are for the new players who may just jump into Daybreak, which is very cool. But yeah, character-wise, Van I'm fucking loving. Like he is shooting like up into my list. I don't know where he is in the list if I had to kind of rate all the main characters, but I am really liking him. And another aspect of Van that I really like is it's just really nice to have a mature character, because like every other game that we play, like Reen from Cold Steel or Lloyd from of Zero/Azure, and even like Estelle and Joshua from Trolls in the Sky, they're all, for all intents and purposes, pretty much kids. Like when you play Trolls in the Sky, I believe Estelle and Joshua are like 16. In terms of Cold Steel, I believe you're like 17, and then in Zero/Azure you are 18. So I guess we're slowly aging up the characters. And what's nice about this game is you're 24, like you're just like a full-ass adult, like you're just like an adult. And what's nice about that is because you're 24, they pretty much automatically make him more mature and make him dismissive of like a lot of the tropes that are usually in these types of games. One trope you'll see a lot in a game is that the main character will be kind of like a person who's kind of doofy, and when like if there's any talk of like romance or something, they'll kind of like they'll kind of freak out and blush about it or whatever. Van has none of that. He's 24. He's not a fucking kid, so like nothing phases him. So there'll be times, for example, you have an assistant, Agnes, who works for you. She is a high schooler, so like them dating is out of the question, obviously. But there are some characters who joke like, oh, like, are you guys dating? Why are you guys always together? And Van doesn't react to it. He doesn't even like, he literally just talks past it and keep talking. But you'll have Agnes kind of like blush or whatever the fuck, or react to it because like she's still like a kid. And so I just like really like that throughout the game. Every single time something like that happens, or there's like some like pervy trope that they're trying to push against like the character, Van's just like, no, like why would I, like he just talks past it. He doesn't care. He's an adult. Like it doesn't affect him, which is very real and very nice, because every other game the main characters are always kind of like falling into that trope, but Van doesn't really do that. And what I kind of like is Van is like goes the other extreme, where like he will make sure other characters are not like that. There's another character, Aaron, who's kind of like a womanizer, and Van very much tells him to like fuck off and not like tell him to like not do that to women, or just like be more respectful or whatever the hell. And so it's very nice seeing that these tropes that you usually see in these Japanese RPGs we're kind of moving away from it, at least with this character specifically. And I kind of like that change of pace, where if he was a 24-year-old and he was for some reason blushing when like someone said like, oh, are you dating your assistant, I'd be like, okay, that's kind of weird, especially because you're a lot older than them and you're their boss. Is kind of weird. And so the fact that he's just like, no, that's just weird, that's out of the question, is just like, yeah, that's a good choice, thank you. They really should have done that a long time ago, but that's just something I really like about Van too. And so yeah, him as a character, your company as a character. So pretty much the way this game works is like you have a company, it's called Arkwright Solutions. Arkwright is your last name, and you pretty much just go out and help people out and like solve cases. That's kind of your thing. And so whenever you get a party member, they're pretty much being hired into the company, which I thought was very fucking cool, because in Trails in the Sky, you're a bracer. In Trails 0/Azure, you're a cop. In Trails of Cold Steel, you're a student at a military school. So in this game, I was wondering what they would do, and the fact that you literally just own your own business is a very fun twist to put on it, especially because you're your own boss. In the other games, there was always someone above you that you had to, get orders from, but in this is like, nope, you are the boss, and you have this very fun dynamic where like you know how the system works and you're just teaching your assistants how it works, like how you actually go out and get quests and help people and things like that. And they just use it very smart in the story too, where like sometimes you're solving a case and instead of Van just like saying the answer, he'll like turn to the assistant and is like, you guys have been following me, how do you guys think the case should go, or what do you think is a solution to this case? And pretty much you have to choose as a player. But the fact that they have a story reason of Van teaching these kids how to solve this case, it just makes sense, where like he would ask them like, yeah, you guys are working for me, what do you think about it? Like, what are your thoughts on this case? And you as a player get to choose, which is, I think, very cool how they kind of mesh that story aspect of you being the boss with the gameplay aspect of, making choices and trying to solve the cases that you're trying to solve. So yeah, character wise, I'm just really liking all the characters that are in it. In terms of NPCs is another thing that I want to talk about. I think it's pretty much the exact same as how the previous Trails games used to be. I've talked about this in the past, but I love the NPCs in Trails. You get to talk to every single one of them. They have a bunch of dialogue, and a lot of the plot, lore, and whatever you can get from them is amazing usually. And one thing that I noticed in this game that they did is not every NPC is interactable now. So for example, if there's a city and there's like, I don't know, 50 people in it, you might be able to talk to like 10. And I'm fine with that. I don't want to talk to 50 people. That's a lot. And this pretty much allows them to populate the cities, but not make it, annoying for the player to play through. And I mentioned this in my last episode, but I'll touch on it real quick. But I really love the system they added to talk to NPCs, where on the minimap, NPCs will be yellow and they'll have a blue text box above them. If you talk to them and you keep talking to them, and once they finish talking, their minimap icon will go from yellow to gray, and their text box on top of them will go from blue to gray. So you know exactly who you've talked to and you're done talking to. So when you just look at the minimap, you'll immediately know whether you're done talking to everyone. The only thing that I don't like is the shop icon does not change. So if you go to a shop, there's obviously someone there, and if you look on top of the shop guy, they'll have a blue text box and you can talk to them until it turns gray, which is cool. But the actual shop icon on the map will not change to gray. So that's kind of annoying. So like sometimes I just don't know if I've talked to everyone, because if there's like 7 shops in the area, I'm like, I don't know if I've talked to them yet. And so I have to go to them in real life and check that out, which kind of sucks. I feel like this is like a very easy thing they could implement from an update. Hopefully that'd be nice, but I don't know if that's specific to me or if people even care. But like, as someone who likes to talk to every NPCs, this quality of life update has been so nice. It would be nice for them to go all the way and implement it for these shop owners too. But yeah, NPCs I think have just largely been pretty much the same, which means that it's good in this game. And so yeah, in terms of NPCs, I think it's good. The next thing I want to talk about is the game loop, because Trails have a specific game loop. Some are kind of different, and in general, whenever I am able to guess what the game loop of a game is, the worse that is. So pretty much I never want to know what's happening next in the game. Like, if for example, if a game is like, okay, we have to fight these 4 monsters, that's the game, I fucking hate that. Don't tell me that. I don't want to know that. Why would you telegraph the entire game from the start? You're just gonna make me feel bored as I'm playing the game. And so there are a lot of games like that which I don't like. And one of my favorite moments in a game I've played in the past, I can't remember which one it is. It might have been one of the Trails of Cold Steel games, but pretty much what they did is they did exactly that, where they're like, okay, so we're going to be doing this mission and we're going to have to go to location A, then location B, then location C. And that's what they told us. And I was like, okay, I didn't want to know that, but sure. And we went to location A. That ended up being a huge chunk of the game, like several hours. And I'm like, that was really fucking cool. And then when we finished, they're like, okay, it's time for location B. And I was like, oh yeah, I forgot they told us this. And I'm like, okay, so we got to do what what we just did 2 more times, okay. But what ended up happening is on the way to location B, something happened which stopped our plan, and we had to pretty much reorganize and make a new plan and just go in a different direction from there, which was really fucking cool. So they pretty much just tricked the player into thinking that we knew the game loop when we really didn't. And that is to say is, in terms of Trails Through Daybreak's game loop, they do have a game loop. Obviously, the Trails games usually always have a game loop. And from a very high level, the game loop is you go into the town, you have quests to do to help people, you do the story, and that just repeats. That's pretty much the rough game loop. But what makes this interesting is they pretty much took a page out of Trails of Cold Steel's book. Is even though you have that game loop, you never know what's gonna come next in the story or location. So every time we kind of go out to, do quests for people, you go to a new location. So we started in Edith, which is the town that you're in, and you were there for like a while. Then you went to an entirely new city and you did the game loop there. Then you went into an entirely new city and you did the game loop there. And because the story doesn't have a obvious trajectory, it's just very interesting. Like, there is an overall plot, which I'll say right now. You learn this in the first few hours, but Agnes is looking for these 8 artifacts, pretty much, that belong to her grandfather, and you're just trying to help her get all 8. That's like the overall plot, and like every chapter, you're trying to get another one. And so that's all we know. But in terms of like the specifics of where we're gonna go, how we're gonna get it, who has the artifacts, you have no idea. And so every minute of the game, I'm just interested. I'm like, yeah, what's gonna happen next? What's gonna happen next? I literally don't know. Like, what city are we gonna go next? Are we gonna go back to Edith? Are we gonna go to another one? Like, it's just a surprise, and that's just something I really love about the game. And again, they do have a game loop. So when you're in the city, you go out, you do the quests, which are called 4 SPG quests, because he's called a Spriggan, and like 4 SPG is kind of a short version of that. But you go out, you get these quests. I do every single quest, so I do all the quests, I help everyone out, and then I continue the story. And usually what ends up happening after you continue the story is it turns night, and Van goes out into the city alone, and you get to do a few more quests and get more character moments, and then it repeats where it goes to the next day. There'll be more story, and you just repeat that. That's a rough game loop. But again, I don't really ever really feel the loop, because the story is so interesting and you don't know where it's gonna go, and the locations are always changing too. Like, if I was on chapter 3 and I was still in Edith, I'd probably be feeling the game loop pretty hard, because it's just the same area over and over. But the fact that I'm going to an entirely new city every chapter just makes it a lot more interesting to me. And so game loop wise, I think this game, does it well for me too. Another thing I want to talk about is the actual world. That is very important to me, because that is what Trails is. If you Google a game with best world building, Trails will probably come up, because it is, in my opinion, the game with the best world building, second to none. I don't think any game comes near it, in my opinion. And so in terms of the world of Daybreak, it's been very interesting, because if you play the Trails games, you know that Trails in the Sky was in Libero, Trails of Cold Steel was in Erebonia, Zero/Azure were in Crossbell, and this all takes place on a continent called Zemuria. And there's been a country that you've never gone to called Calvard that everyone always talked about, and this game finally delves into Calvard and you get to learn about it. And so that's what this game is. And I've honestly been enjoying it. Something that's been very interesting to me specifically is that this game is delving much more into real life culture. So like the other games, I never really ever thought about what country the other games would be in. Like, they're all like European/American feeling, but like I've literally never thought about it. But in this game, they specifically have like there's a town called Longport, which is very clearly has East Asian influences, where like just based on the structural design of buildings and stuff, it looks kind of like China or Japan or something like that. I'm in a place called Tharbad right now, which is clearly inspired by the Middle East, where like everyone's brown, they wear turbans, they wear like, the types of clothes you wear there, like you could tell like this is the Middle East. And so they're clearly taking influences from real life. And so that's just very interesting to see, because that's something that's never happened before. And you can very clearly tell that was a decision they made by purpose, because I don't know where it's going to lead to right now, but there has been already some talk a bit in the story of like racial issues going on in the game, where there's people who don't want immigrants anymore, and like a lot of white supremacy shit. Like, they're literally using these words like white supremacy, racial terrorism, etc. in this game. Like, this is going to be a plot point. And so them choosing to make cities that are based on real life countries or whatever, I think is a smart idea, because I feel like you get to feel that the importance of the racial terrorism in this game. Like, it feels more real, which I think is something they want to do, because I guess I haven't touched on this either, is this game is a lot darker, I feel like, than the other games, where like there are deaths in Trails, like that does happen, but it's usually never really that visceral or serious. But this game, like, it does not hold back. Like the game starts and like one of the characters, I won't say who, but there is a character that just straight up dies. He gets his throat slit and like he's dead, like he's just straight up dead, and one of the characters has to kind of like react to that. There's a character very recently that another character got their throat slit, and like they show it, like they show the character on the ground, blood all over his throat, on the ground, on the walls, and I'm like, Jesus, Tearal's usually doesn't do that. And so like they just have like these really darker tones. Like I'm gonna explain a side quest right now. If you don't want to be spoiled, skip a minute. But there's literally a side quest where a girl hires you, and she's pretty much saying like, hey, my boyfriend hasn't contacted me within a month, can you figure out what's going on? Like he was part of a gang, can you just figure out what's going on? And I feel like these type of quests happen like in Trails, like this style of quest. I'm like, and I assume what would happen is I would find the gang that he's part of. Maybe he got kidnapped, I would have to beat the gang up, save him, and take him back to his girl. What the quest ended up being is you have to kind of investigate what happened to him from different people. You end up learning that the gang pretty much gave him a final mission to infiltrate another organization before, you know, he can come back. And as you go through the quest, you learn that he realizes that he's not gonna come back, and so he sends a letter to pretty much tell the girlfriend that he just fucked off and is cheating with someone else just so she doesn't have to be depressed. And that's cool and all, but you still don't understand what happened to him. And what you end up finding out is you read a newspaper article, and the newspaper article specifically mentions that they found a dead body at the scene of the organization, and it's unknown who he is because he wasn't part of that group. And yeah, you just realize that the boyfriend is just dead, and you literally have to go to the girlfriend and break the news to her. And this game is very cool where you have choices in all your quests, and based on your choice it kind of makes you either go on the lawful side or the evil side. And so in this you literally had the choice of lying to her and saying like, yeah, look, your boyfriend left a message and he's cheating now, you know, move on. Or you could tell her the truth, and I obviously opted to tell her the truth. And she was like, what the fuck, my boyfriend's dead. She obviously like broke down, and I'm like, goddamn bro, this is like more real than I expected. And so this game definitely took a shift to be more mature and more dark, which I kind of like, because the game is still like goofy and like mostly like positive, which I do like to see in these games. But the fact that they're taking more of a mature overtone, especially because the character's more mature too, like I'm down with that. I really like that that this is the direction that the game is going for. And so yeah, like I just like that aspect of the world. Another aspect of the world that I want to mention very quick is one of the things I love looking forward to in the Trails games is how the technology is developing. Like if you go from the first Trails game to the most modern Trails game, you will literally see the technology develop. Like you'll see like there's no computers, and there's these big ass computers, and there's smaller computers, and now in this game you have flip phones. Like you'll see the technology advance. You'll see that like in Trails in the Sky there were airships, but there were no real vehicles. And then in Trails of Cold Steel, like there's some cars, but it's only for the rich, and motorcycles are kind of being invented. And now you're in this game where like not only do you have cars, they're selling sports cars, they do car racing now. There's like F1 racers in this game, they're called Z1 racers. There's like cool ass motorcycles, and you're just seeing the technology evolve, and it's just really fucking cool to see how it not only differs over time but how it differs per region. And so that's just something I've been very much enjoying of seeing in this game too, to see how the technology not only is now in the modern era but is in Calvert specifically. So that's just something I've also loved about the world building of this game. And to kind of end it off is in terms of just a small note is the voice acting of this game. I think the voice acting is good. I want to bring this point up. Usually I wouldn't talk about voice acting, but I noticed in Reverie the voice acting some points is weird. Not only the voice acting, the sound mixing. I've been noticing this in more games recently, is the sound mixing of games are just really fucking bad these days for some reason. So like in Reverie, like there'll be some lines which are very quiet, there's some that are very clipping, and like I don't know why. And some of the voice actors in Reverie were like not that good. Specifically, like a lot of the characters from Trolls in the Sky that they gave voices to, I've noticed just weren't that good. And so I was interested to see like, is Daybreak gonna be fine in terms of voice acting? And it is. The voices are really fucking good. I love Van's voice actor, everyone, like Agnes, Aaron, like Fairy, like the voice acting is great. They all sound good. The sound mixing is good too. The only thing I had to do, I did have to change the audio levels of the voice lower than the music, like 3 notches lower, because it was way too loud before, where like anytime I talked to someone I had to lower the volume of my TV. And so now that I changed it lower, the sound mixing is perfect and the voice acting is of good quality too. And so that's kind of the last point I want to bring for this. I don't want to talk about the story really specifically because it'll just be spoilers anyways, and if I do, I may do that in a future episode where I go throughout the entire game. But yes, that is pretty much my thoughts on A Trails Through Daybreak.